Hey everybody, Steve Borey here from the American Casino Guidebook as well as the Jackpot Gents. And today we're going to do a story about slot machines. Everyone loves stories to learn more about slot machines. And to help us along, I'm going to introduce my son who works with me in the Jackpot Gents and American Casino Guidebook, Matt Borey.
How's it going, everybody? And today we have a very special guest, Josh O'Connell from Flip the Switch, which is a new content wing of Brian Christopher's media empire. How are you doing today, Josh?
I'm doing very well. It's great to be back with you both. It's been a while.
Yes, it's always good to talk to you. One of the most knowledgeable people on slot machines in the industry, so it's always a pleasure having you on. So I guess let's sort of just hop into things. For people who are not familiar with you, what is your background in the slot industry?
Sure. So I will say I've never worked for a slot manufacturer or anything like that. I've always been kind of on the outside looking in, but starting as a player, like many of us, and then over time became more and more involved in the slot community that has formed online over the past, 10 plus years, watching other people play online, and then over time got into slot, casino communities, slot communities, and sort of noticed that there was a lot of um, less than good information sometimes being spread around. My slot attendant told me this, I heard this, my friend Jackie is adamant that this is happening, those types of things, and realize that there could be a great way to sort of find the right information and sort of make sure it's shared out. So I had sort of launched a hobby website a few years back, which led to my getting hired last year as part of Brian Christopher's team to launch this expansion of what they've been doing called Flip the Switch, which we launched last fall. So I write about slots. I work to get great information from our friends in the community, as well as through the research that we do. We answer player questions every day. It's an exciting sort of way to sort of address those questions that are always out there and people want to know. And the process also use the fact that the Brian Christopher team, as we are, can connect with some of these manufacturers now to sort of ask these questions and learn from the experts how things work.
All right. Well, one thing, the topic we wanted to discuss today, I think people in general have this feeling that slot machines have gotten tighter
Mhm.
through the years. So we wanted to address this. And first off, can you explain the concept of tightness and how it's determined in the casino industry? Enlighten
Sure.
us on that, please.
Sure. So we're going to put four terms on the board, I think, because I think all of these are terms that players have heard if they've been playing long enough. So we have tightness. We also have looseness, right? So you have loose and tight, which are on either end. The same can be said for hot and cold, right? So hot and cold, loose and tight, or sort of pairs of words that go together and are really talking about the same thing. And when you're talking about whether a machine is loose or tight or hot or cold, you're talking about its past performance in terms of whether it's generous in terms of its payouts or not. When many players talk about looseness or tightness, they're usually talking about their most recent visit. That can be challenging because if you spend enough time looking into how slots work, their payouts are determined over millions of spins. And I would say that it would be impossible for any one player to accomplish that in one or two visits. So you might have a really tough visit, but that may not be indicative of how the game is going to perform in a very long term. So they might say, hey, this casino is really tight, but that was just, a 3 or 4 hour visit on a Saturday. Um, the industry terms usually tend to be more data focused, right? So a casino will market itself as loose, as if it looks at the data and say, hey, we're paying out on average better than the strip. El Cortez is a really great example of a casino that's been doing this forever. They post on their website a statistic that says we're 27% looser than the strip. And what they mean is they looked at their payback percentages over time and they look at the reported payback percentage for the strip. And when you compare the two, um, what ends up happening is you've got better payouts at El Cortez, and so they're using that as a marketing advantage. So the industry term generally is talking about the actual data. Player definition tends to be more about the individual visit or session, or even single slot that they played.
Now, I guess so, but that's sort of a catch-all term that everybody uses: loose, tight, hot, cold. So, what are the actual factors that influence the perceived tightness or looseness of slot machines in a casino from a player's perspective? Well, I guess from
So
the casino's perspective.
So when it comes to like what makes a game actually loose or tight, there's obviously a few things that are in play. One is the payback percentage that's established by the casino. So what ends up happening is when a game's developed, there are multiple payback choices a casino can select from, and it's usually a pretty broad range, especially on lower denomination machines, can go as low as like 85% often, and as high as, you know, the mid to upper 90s. And you know, that means that no matter which is chosen, the casino still has a percentage that's designed to be held back for them over the long term. But you know, in the short run, on a machine, you could have a jackpot, you could have nothing, right? Like that's the reality of a slot machine. What's happening nowadays, and is certainly something that players are feeling, is that there is a trend towards higher volatility. What that means is that it can be harder to win, but when you do win, you win more. So if you play an older slot machine, you might notice like bonuses of like, you know, 20 times your bet, 25 times your bet. There are a lot of slot machines where getting 100 times your bet, 200 times your bet isn't out of the realm of possibility for an average bonus, but those bonuses are so much harder to get than they used to be, right? So the flip side to having bigger wins is that you can't win them as often. And so that's where, you know, a player might notice that like, hey, I haven't gotten a bonus in a long time, or hey, those line pays have gotten really weak. Matt, you and I, in a previous video that we did here on the channel, actually talked about how that can happen. So when Huff and Puff was iterated into Huff and More Puff, they added more bonus opportunities. They added mansion bonuses and the hard hat bonuses and the wheel and all this stuff. But to offer that more, you know, higher frequency bonus and bigger bonuses, they had to take money away from somewhere, and it ended up being the line pays. And so how you used to get paid bigger on the line pays went way down, some of them as much as 80% from my recollection. And so, you know, that's the challenge, right? So now you're not getting as much money from the line hits on the way to finding that bonus. And so that means that if you don't get a bonus, you're going to get, you know, knocked down very quickly. And so that's sort of the trend in a lot of slot machine design, but players feel it because, you know, they don't get bonuses as much as they used to. They don't leave a winner as much as they used to.
Yeah, I was going to bring that video up myself. And if you're curious to see that video, I'll put a link to it down in the description. I was shocked at how big of a difference there was. Because I know when you're playing a slot machine, that's if it's something that's got a bunch of bonuses and stuff, that's one of the last things. Well, for me personally, I don't know if everybody else, but I just look to see what I have to do to get the bonus. I never look to see what any of the line pays actually pay, you know. So I might just look at see what the biggest what symbol I need pays the biggest on the lines and what's a wild, but I'm not looking at the individual breakdowns. And I was very, very shocked when we did that video about how big of a difference there was. So definitely, if you want to see that, check that out in the description. I'll put the link.
I think in general, when you speak to slot players nowadays, so they always say, "Oh, it's tight. They've gotten tighter." But is there any evidence or research suggesting that casinos are making slot machines tighter over time?
So a white paper was done by a slot manufacturer about 10 years ago now. So this is how long ago this research has been ongoing, looking at why players' money hasn't lasted as long as it used to. And what's interesting to me about it is most of the factors that they brought up are still in play today. One example is the minimum bets and the maximum bets have been increasing. If you think back 20 years ago, it was not unusual to find, say, like a 20-line penny machine or a nickel machine. And now the number of lines have gotten higher, 30, 40, 50, always pays. But the minimum bets have gone up too. So like where it might have been a 20-cent minimum bet 20 years ago, and it might have been a 40-cent minimum bet 10 years ago, it's not unusual to see 50, 75, 88, or even $1 on like on Dollar Storm or Lightning Dollar Link. So these bets continue to go upward. And so of course, if you're betting more, even if the house edge doesn't change, the percentage that they hold back remains steady because you're betting more. That just gives them a chance to get that money faster. The second is that volatility aspect that we talked about. When you have sort of a more difficult climb to be able to get to those bonuses, players will many times, you know, run out of money before they hit that bonus, and so that just simply means that they're going to walk away a loser. I spoke to a slot manufacturer a year or two ago where they said their goal was to have, you know, 20% of sessions be winning ones. So that means every 5 players that sit down, they're only expecting 1 to win. And other industry data is showing it might even be a little bit below that because the manufacturers only have some control over when people walk away, right? The player still has to get up when they're a winner. And so if they don't, you know, that's going to lower that percentage even further. And then the third one is also the speed of the games. And what you'll notice if you look at a really old slot machine versus a newer one is that the reels spin faster on the newer games. The way the speed at which the money counts up when you win counts up faster. Even the bonus designs are sometimes designed to be less take up less time. Like for instance, the old school Konami machines like China Shores, where you could get like 450 free games, and they would play those out one by one. And there are newer Konami games where what they'll do is they'll spin 10 of them out at a time, so you get through the spins much faster and get back to wagering sooner. So all sorts of changes have happened in the industry, but everything is really designed to speed up how quickly you're betting, speed up how much you're betting, and obviously make it harder to win. And you put all those three things together, and the average, player spend per hour is definitely going to be going up.
And one thing I noticed too that you didn't really touch on is on top of the minimum bets getting higher, they've sort of eliminated, like, because you know how it used to be, like if a pay line, if a machine, I think Stinkin' Rich is a good example. I believe it has 100 pay lines, but you never had to bet 100 pay lines. If you wanted, you could have sat there and bet one pay line and done a penny a spin. And now they've sort of eliminated that on I would say a majority of new slot machines at this point, where you just sort of have to bet all the lines. They don't even give you the option to bet less than every single line.
And it also used to be that, like, if you were betting 40 credits, it's because there were 40 lines. Now you might have like a 75 credit bet, 30 lines. So if you're paying 1 credit per line, where's that other 45 credits going? Well, it's going into a bonus that you have to hit to get paid on. And so again, it used to be you could choose whether you wanted to, ante up for bigger or better bonuses. Now they're just baking it into the price of admission. And so all of these things are pushing the bets higher and taking player control away.
So can you discuss any industry standards or trends or practices related to slot machine tightness, and have these evolved over the years? I guess you've sort of just touched on it a little bit there with this company you were talking about, but are there any other topics or things you've seen going on?
Yeah, so I mean, there's definitely data-driven research is a huge part of the casino industry, right? So like whether you're a slot manufacturer and trying to figure out what players are playing and what types of games they want to play, if you're the casino trying to figure out what games you want to put on your floor and what you want them to pay back over time, all of these things are increasingly data-driven, and really, there's all sorts of research now being done to sort of work through this. For the player, though, a lot of this is invisible. We're not seeing payback percentages printed on the machine. We're not seeing, what these experiments are. We have no idea. So like the challenge for us as players is that we don't really know what's beneficial and what's not. And so I encourage players not to get too stressed about it, but know that, there's definitely efforts that are made to maximize your time and maximize the casino's profit, right? Like those are the two balancing sides of the equation. It is an entertainment thing. You're not expected to win when you go in. It's one of the things I always sort of stress is like healthy gambling habits, right? Don't spend your rent money. You can spend your entertainment budget, right? So keep that in mind. Like these are designed to make money for the casino, but there's definitely a balance that's struck to make sure that players feel like they're getting a good gamble for their money. Slots is tough to get a good gamble to begin with because of the high house advantage, but they can still be fun and they can still be entertaining if done the right way. So
yeah, and if they're not fun and they're not entertaining, nobody's going to play them, and then the casinos aren't going to make any money. So you got to keep in mind the casinos do want people to keep coming back.
Now, looking at this from the player's perspective, and you're talking about these things that the industry has done to speed up the game and change the bonuses, etc. What can the player do from their side to possibly increase their chances of winning or having at least longer time on the machine to have some more fun for their entertainment dollar?
Sure. So we'll start by focusing specifically on slots. And then a couple of things that I know you'll throw on the table as a video poker player, for instance. But let's start with the slots. Older machines, as I mentioned, tend to be less driven in this direction, so they'll play a little slower. They'll have those lower bets. Casinos don't generally yank all the old machines off the floor at once. They'll leave some set because there'll be certain ones that players are just big fans of. I know when I was visiting the both of you down in Florida a couple years ago, there were like Bombay machines everywhere, and that seemed to be like an example of a game that players just really liked, and they sort of kept maintained on the casino floor, at least at that point. And that was an example of a game. Yeah, there's I see this, like there's always like if you go to Washington State, it's triple Fortune Dragon in that series, right? Like there tends to be a little bit of that geographic stuff, not a lot, but there's always a game that you see players playing. But you can find those older machines that are still kind of kept on the floor, and you can play those. Now, some players don't like playing those older machines because they're not as exciting or as fun. Understandable. So another thing you can do is some of the slot machines have a speed button, and this is something that video poker players have had available to them for years, but now it's starting to show up up on slots, particularly by IGT, who's been more sort of aggressive with this option and setting on their machines. But you can just choose the slowest speed setting so the reels are not spinning as fast. You can not bet as fast, right? So just because the last spin is over doesn't mean we have to hit spin immediately after to start the next wager, right? The quicker you get to that next spin, that's another wager made against a machine that has a house advantage, right? So speed stopping the reels, all of these things that speed up the game are really just causing you to make more wagers, and therefore over time you're spending your money faster because the outcomes will be resolved faster, right? So you don't have to do those types of things. You can slow down your play. You know, even just
Another
having
one that
someone
I'm
with
guilty of is
Yep.
when it's counting up your credits, counting up the win, let it go, and just look at all those beautiful credits keep piling up. If you've seen any of our videos on our other channel, the Jackpot Gents, we get a big win. We're trying to add it together in our heads, and I just slap that button and let the machine do the math for me. Not a great idea.
Yeah, I mean that big win is supposed to be a moment to pause and celebrate and so forth. You can obviously speed through it. You know, there even like there's even games like Lightning Link where you wouldn't be able to speed through the count up of the coins at the end of the hold and spin bonus. Now the new versions let you hit the button and it'll go and get through that faster, right? So like they're always looking at ways to speed up the game, and we as players can counteract that by just not playing into that. So you know, you can slow down your play a little bit that way as well. And then of course, let me give patented Steve Burry advice before he gets there, which is that you can also play a game with the lower house advantage. An example of that would be playing video poker, which traditionally has a much lower house advantage than slots. Obviously, there's skill involved because you need to know the best way to play each hand that's dealt to you. Knowing those best plays will lead to over time a better payback percentage. So there is a level of skill involved there, but simpler versions like Jacks Are Better have a pretty easy sort of table of steps to learn, and can be very fulfilling for those who want to sort of dabble there. I personally love slots, but when I play my free play if the casino allows it, I always start on video poker, so I have cash in hand and can do whatever I want with it at that point. So I definitely recommend that as another option if you're trying to slow down your spend.
All
And
right,
one
well
thing,
said.
if you do switch to video poker, there's a game called Spin Poker that still has a little bit of slot machine elements to it. I would say of all the video poker games, Spin Poker feels the most like a slot machine. So if you want to lower your house edge but still get a little bit of feel from a slot machine, I would try Spin Poker.
Yeah, nice thing about spin poker too is oftentimes you'll find it on a lower denomination because there's usually 9 lines to it. So you might find it at a nickel denomination where maybe it's like a $2 max bet, which is, you know, still pretty within the realm of reason for many players of slots who can go as much as $20 a spin on pennies now with some of these games.
What role does competition among casinos play in determining the tightness of their slot machines?
There's always sort of the discussion that casinos might loosen up their machines to try to woo players if there's competition, but like I think the Strip is a great example of where that's not necessarily the case, where they just know that it's a tourist destination, and so there's certainly casinos on the Strip that's in a high hold position regardless. I think the argument gets a little stronger sometimes when it's like a big chain versus a smaller joint where they have to compete more for the player attention because they don't have, like, you know, a big network of properties to woo people to. So like if you're I don't know, let's say you're in Atlantic City and you're Golden Nugget or you're Ocean and you have a small, you know, Ocean doesn't have anything other than that property, you know, they may be a little bit more aggressive for comps or for payback. Comps usually is where you'll see it more because of the fact that it's much more visible. And so like if Casino A is giving you $50 and Casino V is giving you $75, you know, and your budget's the same, the player's probably going to favor Casino B, right? So so even with the paybacks, because they're not visible, they're not publicized, unless the casino is purposely marketing those looser slots, which there certainly are casinos out there that do this, as we discussed. It's probably not the number one knob they're going to turn.
Well, now I wanted to jump in here because we had done the published the American Casino Guidebook for 28 years until COVID killed it in 2020. But each year we would put in payback percentages at casinos. Now, some states, they break it down by area, like Nevada, but in some states you can do it by individual casino. And if you went to the riverboat casinos in the Midwest, they were very poor paybacks, but they were each of those riverboat casinos was somewhat isolated, so they could have lower paybacks because if you didn't like it, you know, you couldn't go anywhere else. You were stuck with it. So that was, but if you were in, you know, Atlantic City or in it's just like every other business. Competition is good because if you were in Nevada, like a casino, you can go out and walk down the street to another casino. The other thing is in Nevada, it was always consistent that the casinos in either North Las Vegas or the Boulder Highway area would have the highest payback percentages on their machines.
Yes.
And those casinos catered to locals rather than
Yes.
tourists. So
I think that's more the consideration more than competition, right? Because like theoretically, if a casino on the strip wanted to woo locals, they pretty much can see the playbook of what locals are interested in, because a lot of those locals catering casinos have certain ways they follow. Like, if you look at a casino outside the strip, like they're more likely to do the free gifts and sort of like the point multipliers and all the sort of the standard regional casino types of promotions that drive in the locals, whereas the strip casinos don't really do that because they know that people are flying in from random places, right? So like I think less so competition than knowing your audience, right? I think that's what it comes down to. And so if you are the one casino boat right in the middle of nowhere, I agree with you, but I think competition in and of itself isn't enough. There's more that has to go on to drive players in, and it often comes down to the promotional sort of mindset that they have.
Well, I just wanted to touch on the competition thing as well. There is a chain of casinos where we are, I won't mention any names, that just happen to get table games.
Yep.
And they're the only ones in the area allowed to have live table games. And I will say, I don't play roulette, so I can't tell you about the roulette, but the craps rules are some of the worst rules I've ever seen. And when they first opened, it was $25 minimums at every single table, because they knew that they were going to be crowded. People wanted to play them, and they knew they can charge as much as they want. And I'll tell you what, it was 3 people deep at every single table for the first week or two when they opened. So
I don't want to say competition in itself isn't a thing, but I don't think it's I don't think it's number one. I think I just want to emphasize,
All right. Well, one last point on here, and that was, I tell people if they're going to Las Vegas, again, the casinos in North Las Vegas, Boulder Strip, their slot payback percentages are usually about 2% higher. So I say, well, if you're going to Las Vegas, if you have the time, go visit a local casino. You might get more bang for your buck in a local casino. So now, again, it might be skewed higher because of video poker. They have a lot more percentage of video poker in those local casinos.
Yep.
And they know that video poker is a better game, so they play that. But still, if you're going to Las Vegas, if you have the time, if you have the way to get there, try a local casino. Because
skip Vegas and go to Reno.
Oh, there you go.
Because Reno's even better, right? Like those numbers are even strong. I think among the strongest across the country. So
even higher, yeah. All right,
but again, the Reno, I think the Reno stats tend to skew higher because there is a lot of video poker in Reno.
Good video,
a lot of
very
good video poker in Reno too.
But one slot floor director said on a public forum once, I'll never forget, is that usually where the video poker tables go, so does everything else, right? So if you're seeing generous video poker tables, if you're seeing generous blackjack rules, that's usually a sign that they have a looser philosophy in general, and so that's going to carry over to the slot machines as well, right? Like everything's going to be a little bit better, right? If you're seeing 6-5 jacks or better, which I saw for the first time at a strip casino about 1.5 years ago, and I almost choked, on quarter denom, no less, then yeah, that's probably an indication of sort of how they think about payback overall too, and you should keep that in mind when you're playing games there.
All right, so just wait,
go ahead.
We've lost our order of questions. I think it's up to me here. I just had this question: how do casinos communicate changes in slot machine payouts to their patrons, if at all, and what impact can this transparency have on player satisfaction?
So when it comes to physical casinos, they don't tend to really tell players anything about payback at all. It's one of these things that's interesting. You can walk up to a blackjack table and you can look at the rules and you can get an idea of what the house edge is. You can go to roulette, craps, video poker, even Keno. It's not obvious when you look at it, but if you go to Michael Shackelford's got great calculators for things like Keno, you can punch in the various payouts and they'll tell you what the percentage payback is, right? So when it comes to slots, it's a black box, at least in physical casinos. Now, there are other changes that are happening, and this is one of the things that I've been paying close attention to with my new work at Flip the Switch, which is online gaming. And by the way, this is another way you can slow down your play if this interests you and you're in a legal state, like asterisk after asterisk here. But they tend to have lower bets and also paybacks that are more in the range of 90 94 to 96%. Now, how do I know this? Because they actually publish the RTP in the pay table of most of these games online, which is something that you do not get in a physical casino. So
In America.
in
I
America.
was shocked. I was shocked when I went to the UK that you could just hit the pay table and boom, RTP right there. My dad said, "What'd you say? It was Australia? You saw the same thing, Dad?"
Australia and New Zealand, uh-huh.
Yeah, I
Uh-huh.
guess I've been told by players out in Australia and New Zealand that the regulations are different by zone. So like I think by like why am I not pulling the right word? It's not a state. We call them a state here.
Province or territory, I think it is.
There we go. Let's use territory, but the regulations can differ, so there may be different rules about whether pay percentages have to be published and stuff like that. But there's definitely in the United States it's a black box, but online it's much more transparent. So how will casinos communicate this? The only time they will is if it's a marketing advantage and they want players to know or believe that they are looser than the rest of the slots sort of options around them. And so there are definitely casinos out there that will market this to their advantage, but it's a minority and a small percentage, and unfortunately not very helpful for us as players. And even when it comes to the data that's accumulated, because the reporting depends on, as Steve noted, the market, right? You might not know if an individual casino has made changes because it's blended with 30 others in Nevada, or you might know like to the denomination if things are happening because you'll go and look at Connecticut. And my favorite stat was like the $10 slots at Mohegan Sun had a 3% hold for like 5 years running. It's like that's such a specific and consistent number that it almost seemed like the best bet in New England that I sort of could come across, right? So that's really the only way you know. Unfortunately, they don't put it on the machine. They don't put it on the pay tables inside the machine either.
Now, here's a thought for you, because years ago, you used to see a particular bank of slot machines, and it would say up on top, 98% payback, or up to 98% payback.
Yep.
I don't see those anymore. Are they still around, do you think?
The last time I saw that was a couple of years ago. It was always on an older machine. There was like a bank of $1 slots at Bally's Atlantic City before they were acquired by what is now Bally's, right? And they had these machines. I don't know if they're still there, but they said 97% payback, and they didn't say up to, which is words I hate because that means it could be just one machine out of 6 or 8 in the bank, but it
That's
said
what I was gonna
97%
bring up.
payback. And then another one that I saw at Park MGM before they removed it, which was some older video slots that said 98% payback, and I still got killed on them, so it didn't really work out for me. But you know, it's good. It's good information when you do see it. But I agree with you. I have not seen it much, if at all, in a while.
Well, that was one way they used to show their customers that they had loose machines, but yeah, those are dying out.
And people, whenever I would see them, people weren't really playing them, and I presume it's because of the age of the machines, and so they weren't like the enticing new games. But they seem to always loosen the older machines to try to get a little bit more life out of them. But nowadays, casinos are just finding it's more lucrative to replace all the old machines with a small pod of new ones and roll with it. So you do see a lot more machine replacement going on now than a few years ago as well.
I bet, yeah.
All right, Josh, thank you very much for joining us today. Always a pleasure. I always learn something new from you every time we talk. People want to learn more about you and your work. Where can they do that?
So I primarily work on fliptheswitch.com nowadays. That is part of BC Ventures, which is Brian Christopher's company. We are doing written content, so that's sort of different from what people expect from Brian and his team with the video content. We're also talking about more topics than slots, as you can imagine. We're now talking about table games. We're talking about sports betting, iGaming, and every single day on the site, we answer a question from a player. So that's part of the rotation of things we do. And those who may remember my old mantra of one post every day, well, we're doing 2 because you got to turn up the volume every time you do something new. So every day, at least 2 new articles are being published there. But it's really focused on helping players understand the questions that they want answers to, as well as I said, sharing information that we've learned along the way.
All right, great. Always wonderful talking to you. Thank you very much for spending time with us today, Josh from fliptheswitch.com.